One of my goals is to share with you guys some easy DIYs that are sewing, but really break down what I'm doing. Mayflom here, everybody, and this is a 2 fabric pillowcase. So I'm working on a 12 by 16 pillow, and I always have the pillow out to start. And I kind of look at, okay, what's the size of this pillow? What's my vision? Do I just want one single fabric? In this case, I'm trying to get a little more complicated with my pillows, and I want to do 2 fabrics. So I just kind of get the feel of it, and I also make sure that I have enough fabric that wraps around the pillow that's not going to be an issue as far as, oops, I didn't cut enough or I'm a half inch short. That's horrible. So I've got my 2 different fabrics, and just a disclaimer right off the bat, I am not a professional at sewing. I kind of muddle my way through and learn and watch videos myself and everything. So if you're going, oh, well, May, that's the wrong terminology. Yes, it probably is, because I do things the way that it works for me. Anyhow, first things first, I'm just going to stitch the wrong sides or the back sides of my 2 fabrics together. And you might notice there's like a 1/4 inch of the green fabric exposed. That's because that's the end, right? So that's like the frayed raw end. I did this on purpose because I know that's a straight line, guys. I know that's a straight line, and I don't have to sweat if my straight line is straight enough. If I just follow that along, it's straight. So now we've got our piece of fabric big enough that we've got a pillowcase. If we just folded it over and sewed the top and bottom pieces together, we'd have a pillowcase. It could be that simple. But there's a few more things I want to do. I want to put a little bit of decorative stitching on this, and I also want to, I'm checking out that everything's stitched right. And I'm going to need to iron this, but I really want to look at, okay, well, how does this pillow look? And how do I envision folding it? So one thing I'll do is obviously the inner edge will get folded under like so. This is how I do my pillowcases so that I don't have to worry about, how am I going to stitch this? They're open. And what I mean by that is, so the other side will get folded over. And then obviously I've got a little too much of my one fabric. By the way, that's an August Wren Dear Stella fabric. I got it on Etsy, but it's available lots of places. And then the green is a Kona cotton fabric. So basically this end is going to get folded over, and it's going to have overlap. Usually it depends on the pillow size, but usually 3 or 4 inches minimum overlap to make sure that everything is going to flow nicely, that everything is going to lay nicely on my pillow. But I'm really just looking at here about where I think I'm going to need to do my folds, and if I'm going to want to trim, or if I'm just going to want a lot of fabric folded over. To be quite honestly, trimming would be the smarter thing to do. I just don't always do it. Sometimes I do a bigger fold and then I go, that's right, I should have trimmed off more. Anyway, going on, I'm ironing the fabric. I put this piece of video in here. It's a pain in the behind, but ironing the fabric is vital, guys. It can't be skipped. I've tried skipping it, and when I skip it, I always regret it. I always wish I had taken the few extra moments to, for example, in this instance, iron the edge of the end here, because what we're going to do next for this is we're going to sew the 2 ends of the fabric. These are the ends that would be exposed. These are the ends that are going to be the fold where we actually put the pillowcase over the pillow. So we do actually have to take care of these and sew these. And once upon a time, I used to just, not iron them and just kind of eyeball it. And it always turned out disastrous. So trust me on this. Iron. The other key tool here is, you see those little clips that I'm using? You'll keep seeing them. Adding a little clip or a pin or something holds it into place so that my work doesn't get immediately undone, and it's just a little easier. Moving on to the other end, hindsight, it's been a long time since I've made a pillowcase, and I should have just cut instead of leaving a really wide fold on that end, but I didn't. It'll be okay. It'll be fine. It's going to be cute, but that's just something to remember. You don't have to leave all the fabric. You can trim it off. What I am doing right here is tedious. I am taking my ruler and I am making sure, and I'm using the center line there. I'm just making sure that the fabric is the same distance and I'm making sure how many inches over it's going to be is the same so that I don't end up with, oops, it was, 4 inches wide here and only 2 inches wide there, or whatever it might be. And then I'm using my clips to pin it where I know I'm going to want that to be held. And then, of course, I'm going to get my iron in here. And by the way, that's a thick, inch thick piece of felt that is my ironing mat here in the studio. That lets me do vinyl. It lets me do little projects like this without having to go and get out the ironing board or set that up somewhere in here. I don't know where I think I would set it up, but anyway, that's what that is for. And then I'm just kind of looking at all my little bits and pieces. We're not going to worry about the very ends. When we stitch this, what we're going to do is just stitch. You just need to stitch down the end so that the raw end is not raw, so that the pillowcase is going to be covered nicely, right? Just like so. And just straight stitch. I'm just going to straight stitch down one side and then down the other. Now, if for some reason I do this and then it's just way too much fabric, I should have done more, I can always do another fold and another stitch. So you can always take more off. Now, side note, you see my straight stitches, and then this is not anything except optional. I'm adding a decorative stitch along the seam just because I think it's cute. See? Straight stitching all up and down the sides. So both ends are stitched. See? That end is folded and stitched. The other end is folded and stitched. Basically, we're done with the pillowcase. All we've got to do is, number one, and you see I keep pulling the pillow out. Number one, I need to line up those lines because I don't want it to be, completely crooked. I line up those lines to see, about where it's going to be. Now, I did all this wild stitching on the one end and I don't like it. I want the quieter side. So look, that's going to be the hidden piece. And then the quieter side with just a little bit of stitching will be the other piece. So stitch the top and stitch the bottom. Once you know, and you can see here, what I'm doing is making sure I know where those lines should be. Couple things that I do when it's in the pillowcase, I do kind of look at okay, about here is where I think I want it. And then I'll slide the pillow on out, and then I will measure, and I will use, on my measuring, I will look and make sure and just gently slide, gently tuck to make sure it is even so that I have a rectangle so that I don't have some other shape. And this part, guys, it is tedious to keep pulling the ruler out and looking, but trust me when I say you're much happier and better off. Oh, and then I just pin it so that it can't undo itself once I've got it in the right spot, and then repeat on the other side. Optional, and I do always double check the pillow that I do think have the right size. Other step, optional, I should have a fabric pencil in here and I don't, so I used a Sharpie. It's fine because I ended up going inside the line and I ended up cutting off where the Sharpie actually was, so you're never going to see it on my actual pillow. But just a note, a fabric pencil would be much better, or an erasable pen. I'm just making sure that now that my cut lines are, not cut lines, my stitch lines are where they should be. I like putting a line on this part because I find it's much easier for me to stay straight if I have that visual line. Some people don't need that, but I really do. So I look at that, and then as you can see, I'm using my clips again just to hold the fabric where it's supposed to be so that everything's inside out again, of course, but just so that everything is holding where it ought to be before I go in and stitch. And I'm just going to stitch just on the inside of that line all the way down both sides. Nice and easy. Once I've done that, guess what? It's not going to be perfect. Oh, so once I do that, I am going to go ahead and use my scissors to trim off excess. And then I flip it right side out, which you can see here. Here it goes. Flip it right side out and shove the pillow in. Now, if I'm lucky, everything turned out great and I love it and it's the perfect shape and everything's perfect. I'm just going to be very honest, and I've followed a bunch of different patterns over the years and it never turns out, sometimes it turns out perfect, but it's fluke. I can do the same pattern over again and it doesn't. Sometimes there might be a little extra, maybe on the corners, maybe at the edge, maybe you wish you had it a little tighter. Guess what? This is what I love about this project the most. This is a super easy project to, just flip the pillowcase inside out again and cut a little more, stitch a little more. Do whatever else it is that needs to happen to make this pillowcase the exact perfect size that you actually want. Not difficult. Now, in this case, I decided, it's been a long time since I tried rounding the corners, and I wonder if this is a good candidate for it. Let's try it. So to round the corners, what I do is I make a mark. In this case, I think it's 1 inch or 2 in. Oh yeah, and if you find any loose threads, go ahead and trim those. 1 inch or 2 in, I'm going to make a mark at each of the corners and then just eyeball an approximate curve and draw that in. And then I'm going to stitch along that curve. So, handy dandy ruler out, and then I'm just marking at the corners. I think it's 2 inches. 2 inches in on either side, because that'll make sure that it's nice and even. That'll make sure that my little curve is coming and going evenly. And this is not required, obviously, but this is just me showing you this is real life, right? I call myself a terrible sewer because I can never quite remember to follow a pattern. I can never quite, do it just so, but I come up with different ways that work for me and work for my brain, work for my creative process, so that I don't have to be frustrated or spending tons of hours and hours on projects that should be easy and simple. And so there we go. So you can see that just makes it rounded. That's not necessary. It's optional. And again, there's that super fancy stitched end that I ended up not liking and saying, May, you went too far, but it's okay because it's the hidden one. No one's ever going to notice unless they pull that pillow out. And then I can kind of fluff it. I always you see me kind of smack the pillow around because you have to condense the pillow to shove it in the pillowcase. So then sometimes you have to kind of fluff it up. And if you're happy with it, if you think, okay, this is great, great. If you're not, like right there, I'm like, okay, well, now this, this side is still kind of loose, or I'm not kind of happy with this or that, then you can just continue to adjust as needed. And it looks right there. It looks like the fabric is way off where it came around, by the way. It's not. Anyhow, let me know what sewing tutorials and what kind of help you would like. I would love to hear from you. And stay tuned for a different video about how I can also decorate this with vinyl.